Start it over.
Okay.
That was a joke.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown, senior at KBTX, Texas A&M. So now Max is in my head. Now
that's amazing.
We're just gonna
love that.
We're just gonna keep rolling on this.
Okay.
I am Travis Brown. I am the senior Texas A&M sports writer here at KBTX. Max just made me do this again because I got it right, but he was joking with me.
I wasn't expecting that to happen, though. I'm sorry.
That is Max Crawford.
Now I'm in your head.
He's in my head. And the guy who is the voice is in my head is this guy to the left.
Yep.
That's senior. Chief meteorologist Max Crawford.
The senior part.
You just got messing with me.
We can't stop recording.
We
now.
can't
We
stop.
have to
This
keep
is too
going.
good.
Doing it
Am
live.
I junior over here?
This
Or are we
is-
all seniors?
No, we're all seniors because we're on the podcast, baby.
Sophomore.
Yeah.
This is sophomore sports director Tyler Shaw. So, Max, it was cold this week. Why did
Still
you make
kinda
it cold?
I did nothing of the sort.
Why?
I can promise you that. Once it get after Christmas and I'll even say after New Year's and maybe even give you some grace up to Valentine's Day, which isn't here yet. I hate winter. Winter weather forecasting is very, very difficult. I think we did a pretty good job. The snow totals were not as much as what we expected, but the overall impacts were about the same as what we expected. So I'm giving us an A.
What's different between winter weather forecasting and like hurricane season or another busy time?
I think, well, I mean, there's plenty of differences, obviously. I mean, because there's ice versus water for the main part, and deciding at what point that the switchover happens from water to ice to back to water again to maybe ice again, and knowing the temperature profile, the atmosphere, like a lot of that is important in tropical weather forecasting too. But it's to be even more quick about it, it's weather that we just don't see all that often, and so you almost have to like brush off the old textbooks and make sure that you're doing it right.
So what you could have said is it's cold, idiot. That's the difference between
but I was
the
trying to
winter
be
weather.
nice.
Okay, fair.
It seems so fickle here, though. You know, like what
Right.
are you exactly going to get? Say, I don't envy that part of your job.
One of the things I do like about winter weather forecasting, though, is that you can. This isn't something you should lean heavily on, but you can rely a little more on what we call analogs, and it's essentially weather history, and say, okay, well, what have other setups in the past brought us wintry precip here? And so you like kind of do a little digging, look at old forecasts and how things played out in different Texas winter events, because there just aren't a ton of them as compared to severe weather outbreaks and stuff. So you become a little bit of weather historian.
If I remember
fun.
right, on an earlier podcast, the one that we were up at the Cotton Bowl for, we actually said that we got our journalism, our meteorology degrees because we reported on
Obviously
snow in Dallas.
Yes.
So
Yes.
counter argument.
Oh, about whether
About
or not
us,
you got your
about that
degree?
we basically got our meteorology degrees because
Sure,
we covered
man.
snow in Dallas.
Let me send you some of my differential equations homework. But here's the problem. If I did that and I told us all to complete a worksheet, we probably get about the same amount right.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Oh, I would
It's
get
been a
0.
while.
There's a
Conceptually-
reason. There's a reason I do words.
Conceptually, I could explain to you what's on the paper, but like as far as actually solving the problems, no, I'd have to go back and study some more.
Were you a big math guy?
I actually was, kind of ironically. Normally journalists aren't.
Yeah.
But
Sports journalists, like there's an avenue where you can be really into like statistics and stuff.
yeah.
I would not be able to do one of those equations.
Just think of everything like on base percentage and slugging percentage and stuff.
There's websites for that.
Oh,
There's
To
a Pro
which you have
Football
subscriptions.
Focus.
I was gonna
There's a
say.
reason why I love Pro Football Focus
Yeah.
so much. Is
Is-
they do the math for me.
is there a baseball version of that?
They're kind of not necessarily for like public consumption, but there is a stat thing that the teams can buy into.
Speaking of, kind of in a roundabout way, because I know we wanted to start with basketball. I seen a tweet today about the most efficient 3-man groups in college basketball, and sitting atop were 3 Texas A&M players.
Most efficient, huh?
Yeah. He's bringing up the analytics, baby. Oh, he's got a login.
I
at
do have a
Travis go.
login.
For those of
This
you,
is great radio.
For those of you who are not watching this, Travis is
Now let's
actively
play.
typing in it. He
Let's play
forgot
this
his
Travis
password,
knows
y'all.
what his
He forgot
password
his
is.
password. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask another question while Travis is doing that. Tyler,
Yeah.
I have a concern.
As you typically do. Yes.
I always have concerns when it comes to Aggie sports. I always have beliefs too, but and faith. What are we gonna do about our guys shooting at the line? What are we gonna do about that? Is that something that can be fixed within the season? Can we at least get better by 15%?
You would think you should be able to. It was kind of interesting. We asked Andy Garcia that, about those free throw struggles, and he basically said, it's not a mental thing, or it's not. But okay, but if it's not, then he said, we're working on it all the time in practice. Well, sure, but where are the results of that? And maybe it's one of those things that it evens out throughout the season, but it is wild, the kind of struggles at the free throw line, because that is the most controllable part of a basketball game, is making your free throws.
And is it not such an important part of
Absolutely.
the design of this offense?
Yeah, the way this offense is, you would think that, and they convey to us that they do stress it all the time, and that they have stress it. So it's just not translating right now. So is it possible? Absolutely. These guys are high-level basketball players that should be able to make their free throws.
Figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out.
I mean, could you kind of equate it to plate discipline with a baseball player when they're a good hitter and they're just kind of in a slump?
Sure.
Yeah.
And shooters getting shooting slumps.
Sure.
Free throw slumps like this, though. I mean, it's
tough, man.
Yeah,
That's what worries me. That's what if there was any part of Aggie basketball that kept me up at night, I think it would be that. I'm pretty confident.
Well, so this is interesting. This 3-man group on here, because it's Wade Taylor, Solomon
Yes.
Washington, and Anderson Garcia. And I would argue that Anderson Garcia actually hasn't been Anderson Garcia
that we're used to last
over the
year.
last it's really through conference play. So it is that is for total offensive efficiency. He has been used more in the offense when he's out there. He's kind of the pivot man when they run some of their set plays, because surprisingly he's a really good passer.
Yeah.
He can really get the ball into the low post as good as a point guard. And so I think that's kind of where that weighs into that. But on the defensive side and the rebounding side, Andy really hasn't been Andy.
Right. And that's what we're used to thinking of Andy as, is kind of a rebounding specialist, a defensive presence. And same with Solomon on the defensive end. So he hasn't, but maybe a lot of that is his emphasis on running through, being kind of a focal point on the offense.
Speaking of Solomon, is he one of our best 3-point shooters? Is that even worth asking? I don't really ask in jest.
If he shoots his threes at a trajectory that's higher than 0 degrees, because he likes to fire those
low right to the rim,
low missiles.
That's how I shoot a 3.
Into the rim. When he gets a little bit of arc under that,
Yep.
he's not a bad 3-point shooter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You give him an open look, and he'll knock down a 3.
You know what just the thing about how the season is going, and we kind of knew this when we saw how good the SEC looked at the start of the season, and this happened last year too, where we got a lot of SEC teams in there, and then they kind of underperformed. I just have a feeling that's not going to be the case this year. I think we get a lot of SEC teams in the tournament, and I think a lot of them win at least a couple of games. So the thing that stinks about that, though, is that we could be prone to what has been typical Buzz Williams basketball team go on a run and then go on a other way run and then figure it out by the postseason type of deal. And so I think we kind of stopped the bleeding against LSU, but we still have a very, very long way to go in conference schedule. But also, if we do go on another like losing streak and kind of figure it out towards the end of the season, I don't know that really tells us anything about what the team is as a whole, and just kind of tells us again that the conference is quite tough.
Yeah, I mean they're going to lose some games down the. That's just.
It seems like everybody is, right?
Well, exactly, and they've done enough, and the conference is so deep and so good that I mean they're in the tournament. At this point they've done that much this early on, but yeah, it's. I mean they're gonna eat each. I mean, Buzz was saying, Alabama kind of creamed them. Ole Miss goes to Tuscaloosa, creams Alabama.
Yeah.
And you say, that doesn't bode well for us in Oxford. I wouldn't be surprised if A&M beats Ole Miss in Oxford. It's one of those things that the SEC is going to eat each other alive. I mean, every team. Texas just beat Missouri. I didn't think Texas was all that.
Yeah,
good.
that was a close one last night, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like we're battling between a 3 or even 2 seed, or do we just hop in on like a 5 or a 7 seed?
That's exactly what I'm pulling up. A couple of tools here. Bart Torvik is one of those analytics guys, kind of like Ken Palm and stuff, and he has like a metric to shape out what the tournament field will look like based on his projections. Right now, he has A&M at a 4.7 seed, so right there in a 4 seed on the 4 line, heading into if the tournament were to happen today. So actually, they have on the 4.7 has them on the second team on the 5 line. But then let's count ahead of them on in the SEC. They have Ole Miss on the 4 line. They have Kentucky on a 3 line. They have Florida on a 2 line, Alabama on a 1, Tennessee and Auburn.
They have
all
three
on the 1 line.
3-1 seed SEC teams.
And so that's telling that a lot of the way that the SEC standings iron out this year might actually be a lot of what the top 5 or 6 lines look like.
So if we want to get a really good seed and not just make the tournament, the next 2 or 3 weeks seem pretty crucial, huh?
So there's a cool tool here. Yes. There's a cool tool here called bracketmatrix.com.
You're a cool tool.
I am a very cool tool. I'm going to change my lower third on here just to say
Travis Brown, a cool tool.
The A&M comes in on the 5 line on this, and this compiles all there's 74 mock brackets heading into this week. This was updated yesterday. So the average of all of the mock brackets basically on the internet, A&M is a 4.34, which by their rankings puts them right at the number 1 5 line right now.
Yeah,
and I think anything. What is a good seed? Anything 5 or lower?
I guess, but I would really prefer to have a 3 or 4, right? Because what's the one that sets up with the 1 the second game?
8 and 9.
Okay,
would be.
So I guess right now we can say we're pretty safe from avoiding that fate. But man, I would love a 3 or 4 seed.
I think if you come in at a 5 seed in the Sweet 16, you'd be facing the 4 seed, or was that the second round?
I don't know.
The 5 seed gets the 5-12 to
math, guys.
I know.
Math.
I'm just trying to. I'm trying to visualize a bracket right now.
That was foreshadowing that we had earlier, talking about doing math.
You would face the 4, but it's not the second round. I think you're right. It's the Sweet 16. Is it goes to 7-10?
A 5 seed. This is great podcasting.
Yeah.
A 5 seed would face the 6 seed.
Okay.
In the right?
No.
No. You do the math.
So a 5 seed would end up not having to face that 1 seed until the Elite 8, right?
Yeah. So 5 and 4 in the second round.
Yeah.
And then you get the 1 seed in the Sweet 16.
Gotcha.
If you're a 3 and a 4, you're on the other side of that. You're a 3, you face the 6, and then you don't face 3 and a 2.
So really, you want to be a top 3.
Yeah.
If you're a good seed.
Right. If you're a 3 and a 2, if you're a 3 seed, you completely avoid the 1 seed until the Elite Eight.
Yeah, and I think it would be foolish to hope for like a 1 or 2 seed. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
But I do think it's kind of reasonable to maybe hope for a 3 or especially a 4
Yeah, if they
seed.
go on a little run, they've got the resume to make a push for a 3 seed, which would that would probably be the most ideal.
And I mean, would you guys not say that this is the strongest non-con resume that A&M basketball has maybe ever had?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the net rankings here. I mean, even if you're going to include a little bit of conference, A&M is 5-3 against Quad 1 teams, which puts them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tied for 4th in the country in Quad 1 record. I mean, Auburn.
Does that say Auburn is 10-1 in Quad 1 games?
They are
Auburn's
unreal.
a machine.
Do you know what?
Right
Okay, but you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen, and I probably shouldn't say this considering we haven't even played them yet. That's going to be everybody's darling going into the tournament, and they're going to be one of the ones who just busts everybody's bracket early on. That's just what's going to happen.
Auburn.
They're really good. Yes.
I mean, yes,
really
that's
good
why
this
it's
year.
March Madness.
Yeah,
Yes.
cue Arizona basketball every single. They're really good this year. Okay.
That's what the nice thing too about that 5-4 line though is there are so many upsets, which I guess could be a bad thing, but you could potentially be a 5 seed having to play the 13 in the second round. Because there are going to be those 13-4 upsets. We always have 12-5 upsets. So if you can avoid that upset in the first round, there's the possibility you have a favorable path being in the 5-4 spot.
I mean,
as opposed to kind of the 8-9 that they've been in the past recently, where you run into Houston in that second round.
What was the highest Kennedy seed? Was it a 4 seed? That one year we had Robert Williams and we
5
messed.
Oh,
that was a 5 seed.
Yeah, I think 5 was the highest seed they've ever had.
Is it the one where we beat North Carolina to go to the Sweet 16? This Stump the Journalist is going really well.
I know.
I am
You're stumping
you guys.
I think they've been higher, but I don't.
Highest seed was 3.
Yeah, I was about to say they've been
Yeah.
a 3 seed. Was that 2016?
I like how
that was
Stump
what
the
I would've
Journalist
guessed.
just turned into Journalist Google.
Travis types in
Mid-podcast.
Google.
I like this because
I think it was 2016.
When you're driving this thing, it frees me up a little bit more to get solid information.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh,
You're so
2007. They were.
That was
3
when,
seed.
I can't remember if that was when we lost to Purdue
They
or
went
LSU.
to the Sweet 16.
I think we lost to Purdue that year.
Yes. Here's the deal. You look at some of A&M stats. They've been bad at offensive rebound. They've been bad at rebounding for the last every game except the LSU game.
Yeah.
In the last little stretch of those losses. But with how bad they've been in offensive rebound in those games, they're still number 1 in the nation. So that shows how good they were leading up to that. Here's my take. With how many Quad 1 games the SEC played this year, how many times good on good showings that these teams had to put out on tape, teams are more prepared to scout these teams. Because there was really nothing that no wrinkles or anything that these teams could hold back. When they were playing all of these Quad 1 non-conference games early, they had to go out there and put their whole arsenal out there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I think there is so much tape on so many of these teams. That's how you get a result like Buzz was talking about, where Alabama comes in, just obliterates A&M on the offensive boards, and then goes and Ole Miss comes in and holds them to 5 offensive rebounds the next game.
Yeah.
It's just that the scouting for how to go up against those teams is so good because there's so much tape this year that it's the team that, Buzz has talked about this. It's the team that practices how they're going to switch what they do mid-game beforehand because the other team is going to sniff that out eventually because of how much tape is out there.
And it seems like Buzz is. I mean, that's kind of not really his forte, but he's been known to switch it up like right in the middle of the game. At least as far as the results on the scoreboard are concerned, right?
It'll be interesting down the because you look at the with more and more tape, and you go later in the season, they've got some game. Auburn is their second to last regular season game. You got Tennessee kind of late in the season, so it's going to be interesting. I guess how I think it bodes well for A&M playing those teams later. I think the way A&M is and the way Buzz Williams kind of his teams have been. They're going to win one of those games against one of these top SEC teams. Again, there's a few more losses down there, but I think one of those late games, and maybe that's what kind of pushes them up.
It's like a statement type victory.
Yeah, statement type victory. I just see that happening. But again, it's going to be the consistency of this team that I don't know. We haven't seen yet.
Yeah, definitely. Max, I mean, as the fan voice of this, where's the vibes meter for the basketball team?
So I think the perfect way for me to have approached this season is how I continue to approach it. Tyler, I know you and I have discussed this in full, probably more than what you've wanted. But my vibes are set to neutral.
Okay.
Meaning I have next to no expectations. Somebody run the tape of me 5 minutes ago talking about hoping for a 3 or 4 seed. But it's a very clearly tough conference, especially this year. We've got a lot of senior leaders, but I think one of the biggest things I'm falling back on right now is we're not a good free throw shooting team. And if you want to make a run deep and you're in close games and you're especially a part of an offense who's really needs those points at the line to be a really good and efficient offense, like I can't sit here and like hope for an Elite Eight appearance in this moment. I definitely think it's possible. I won't say it's likely though. So my vibes are set to neutral, and I'm just gonna try as best as I can to watch Buzzball whenever I have the time to do so. I'm just gonna try to make it to a couple of games still this spring. But yeah,
right now
is that sad almost? I feel like I'm guarding my heart a little bit here, and I'm just trying to temper my expectations by having no expectations.
I do feel like that's more of a you can back or agree or disagree. I think that's more of a Max approach than maybe the overall A&M fan approach. But maybe it is kind of the overall A&M fan approach.
I get where Max is coming from though, because granted this should be kind of their best team, and maybe you should have high expectations, but then you kind of look in history, it's like, well, maybe I'll believe it when I see it type of thing. One of those where they haven't been out of the second round and really just got back to the second round for the first time in a while last year. So it's
I don't think this is a year where we're gonna win the regular season conference championship. To some teams that doesn't really matter. To what A&M basketball program is, I think that matters a lot. Maybe we could be a team that's prone to going on a run and getting a conference championship tournament. So like as far as hardware is concerned, I don't know that I really have any expectations there either, because you would obviously think somebody like Auburn or Alabama is just going to turn up the Jets and smoke everybody in the conference tournament. So I don't know. I think we'll be there in March. I love having A&M in there so I can put them on my bracket, and I usually get them to at least the Sweet 16. So I would be, I guess, to contradict everything that I just said, I would be pretty disappointed if we didn't at least get to the Sweet 16 this year.
Really?
I think that's a prevailing opinion, because that's the next step in the progression.
It is the next step in the progression.
Considering all the senior leadership that we have, all of the experience, I don't think next year is going to be a year where there are a lot of expectations, or where there should be a lot of expectations, unless there's just some portal magic that happens. So of all the teams that Buzz has had, I feel like this is kind of the year where he makes some sort of noise.
Without knowing what portal options are going to be out there, just from what A&M loses, you would see them as a bottom third of the SEC preseason media pick.
Yeah,
just from
after
everything
the
that
production that they're going to lose. Yeah.
Well, for this team, just a couple of bullet points that interest me. Not only is they the number one offensive rebounding percentage team in the country this year, but that's been kind of their MO the last few seasons, and one of Buzz Williams' MOs. This is the highest offensive rebounding percentage of any Buzz Williams team ever.
Yeah.
So this is a very good offensive rebounding team, but it's also, they have the lowest free throw percentage of any Buzz Williams team since the first year that they were at Virginia Tech, and that's the only one that's lower than the 67.7% that they're at now.
It's not good.
You made the point. If they're going to, one of the reasons why they've been good at making runs deep into the SEC tournament the last few years and then winning games in the NCAA tournament is the fact that they got to the free throw line and made enough free throws in years past. That's going to be the thing that makes or breaks this team moving forward.
And it's one of those things, like I said, that is one of the most controllables that it can be done. So, again, right now, looking at the data, they're just not shooting free throws well at all. So, yeah, I think this could break them. But in the same way, the biggest thing is to keep getting to the free throw line. Whether you're making them or not. I think with this team, eventually, that percentage is going to come up. I just don't see that trend being this bad at shooting free throws the remainder of the season. But again, that's kind of a make or break thing. Could be.
Max, what are the we've had a few weeks now. What are some of the vibes for football? What are some of the thoughts that are bouncing around in your head about this A&M football team?
What an abrupt segue.
Yeah.
I think a lot of, unless you're just a straight up college football fanatic, I think a lot of fans get to the point where you're like, you know what, it's time for a break. It's time to kind of turn the brain off, like just put it on standby. And so I have seen a couple of things that have been encouraging, but I've been trying not to think about it too much just yet. And then it's going to ramp up again. Honestly, like the first Aggie baseball loss and be like, all right, football season. That's not at all the case, because I think our baseball team is going to be very, very good. But that's also one of the reasons why I'm like, hey, well, let's get through the spring, because we might have a very good basketball team, and all indications are that we have maybe even an elite baseball team who can repeat their success of last year. But I think I feel pretty good. To me, it was refreshing to still see Elko. Like, I'm still thinking about that post game presser, because I don't think we've heard from him since, right?
Since the Vegas Bowl?
No, we haven't.
Just about how he was like, man, we have stuff to work on. And I think his words were, I don't want to see that version of the defense ever again, and we're going to yada yada to make sure that happens. I don't know exactly what that is. I'm not going to pretend to know the inner workings of personnel decisions being made on like an assistant level and stuff like that. But I do like what we have done to address the seemingly skill talent gap by picking up especially two very, very good, and one proven and one clearly talented and minorly proven wide receiver, talking about Concepcion and Craver. So, and I believe we picked up a tight end kind of project from Texas and stuff, and so it's clear that we found some weapons to pursue, and I'm very excited to see what happens with that. One of my favorite times of year is when we're really in baseball full swing, and then we have like a spring football season where we're kind of like anticipating. I think Elko is a very, very good coach. I'm very excited to see Colin Klein's offense in his second year with more weapons. I'm excited to see an Elko coached defense, whoever it is that's calling plays, in their second year knowing the scheme, and what's going to be a challenging schedule. But like, I think the expectations should be high for next year. And is that fair to Elko? Maybe not, but to at least repeat what we did last year, just from a pure number standpoint, I think it should be the baseline.
You made a good point. I'm going to key in on something that you said there as kind of a question raised to both of you, something I've thought about recently. And I pose it to you first, Max, as the fan perspective. Would you be sad if the spring game went by the wayside? Because that's been a point of conversation I've heard a lot when talked about how to fix the transfer portal windows, and if there might just need to be like one in early January or something like that, and eliminate the spring one, because I would think that a lot of coaches are not as interested in a spring game when a lot of other teams who could be scouting out their players could be getting tape on the depths of their roster by just turning on, SEC Network or whatever whenever the spring game is on. So does the spring game still have value, in your opinion, to the football programs and then to the fan bases as well?
I think, yeah, it has value just in getting practice reps and reps with your team, but with the portal window opening back up again after that time frame, I guess it doesn't have as much. And I mean, you've seen the like outside of like Georgia and OU, nobody goes to spring games, and like that's the case at A&M too, where we regularly sell out that big old stadium. Spring games aren't like super well attended. I think Elko's first spring game was maybe one of the best attended spring games we've ever had, and we only filled maybe the first bowl. So like I like going to them. I enjoy them, and if I can't go, I watch them on TV, and I'll watch like the quote unquote highlights after the fact, and then I just kind of forget about it afterwards. Like if it's July and I don't have any A&M football content, sometimes I'll go back to the spring game. But yeah, I don't think I would be heartbroken. Like there's enough going on in the spring here in BCS, but I would be a little sad.
It's one of those things that because they are public, they are televised. I mean, I don't think coaches are showing their hand too much anyways. I mean, I don't know how much value, sure, the spring practices maybe, but the actual game itself, I really don't know how much value that adds to these programs now, especially with how the transfer portal is and, yeah, how much these
I will
these kids
say
are moving.
the only reason that I had like high hopes for people like Bostic or Micah Tees or I don't know, just other people of that caliber is because of like a random play they made in a spring game. You're like, oh, watch out for that guy.
And that might be the only time you see them.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that could be an argument against it in saying that it puts undue pressure on a player who, like you said, legitimately
Had
made
a couple of good reps.
one play against like
Yeah.
a half of a first team defense.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's something that's intriguing. You know, as journalist, as the person, I can't stand spring games or just all of spring practice because it's so hypothetical.
Sure.
Like you were saying, like you can say like, oh, I saw that this guy is fast, but
Yeah.
is he fast against a cornerback who isn't going to see any action
Yeah.
in this season? I don't know.
All of these people are faster than me, I will add.
Well, yes, that is a fact.
Yeah.
I could run a 4.6 back in the day.
Really?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
I never broke 5. I
Well,
was a slow guy, a slow boy.
you were a hog molly,
I was almost 300 pounds my senior year.
and I was a kicker, so it didn't go to use for
Yeah.
anything. So
Unless you kicked a very bad kick.
okay.
Yeah,
I
then
did have a punt that I kicked into a stiff 30-mile-per-hour wind that went forward and then came backwards.
That'll happen.
And landed
there
on
you
the
go.
10, and I had to run back and get it.
That can happen.
Maybe the speed, took advantage of the speed there.
That's on your coach for going punting.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's. I'm just a team. I'm just a team player.
Do what coach told you to.
Tyler, what lingering football questions have been on your mind since the football season ended?
The biggest thing is how is the defense addressed? I think that's the biggest one. And overall, when I'm looking at kind of football in general, I mean, you look at the game that was just played, Ohio State Notre Dame, and it's prevalent in this day and age. I mean, Ohio State had the most expensive roster, and they won the national championship. They went on a hell of a run.
And Notre Dame had one of the most experienced rosters, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Experience and money is
Right.
That's what's going to get you wins in today's day and age. You get Ohio State's or Ole Miss's running back, and you get Kansas State's quarterback, and you throw them all together, and that's what gets you wins. So it'll be interesting. I think Elko's done a decent job with the portal so far, but he's going to have to keep on doing that, and they're going to have to get these. If Micah Hudson pans out or Concepcion, he's going to have to keep getting those type of guys to reload every single year.
There is a lot of they're bringing in a lot of wide receivers as they needed to.
Yes.
But to that point, that's a lot of wide receivers who are having to learn the whole playbook this offseason. And that's part of this. That's part of the transfer portal era that players are having to come in and learn stuff quickly. But I'm just curious to see how, when you're going to have probably, 3 or 4 guys out there who, or at least 2 out there maybe on a play who are brand new this year, how much of that goes in? Because there is a lot of stories of guys at that position who were supposed to be big name players who just don't see the field because they just can't get a full grasp of the right routes and the right playbooks. And so that's always a question mark to me.
You know what gives me a little bit of good feelies about that, though, specifically, is I think the silver lining you can take is that it looks like hardly a single person is going to have to be replaced on the most important position group in all of football, and that's the offensive line.
Yeah.
I said at the very beginning of the season last year, I said if our offensive line is marginally better, we will have at least a decent season. Cushing seems to be a miracle worker. I'm really, really excited to see what some of those guys can do coming up. Hope they put on some good weight, and hopefully, a couple of the tight end additions that we saw, those are good blocking and receiving tight end. I think we have a good nucleus. We'll have a quarterback that we know is going to be our guy moving into it, so we can build the rest around that. That's what I'm telling myself. Anyway.
No, I like that thinking, because I think that with the skill guys, I think that's, I get the, being hesitant on bringing in new guys, learning new plays. I think that's the least of the worries, though. If you have the nucleus and the experience on the lines, you got a quarterback that can perform. These skill guys almost you can kind of plug and play if they're the right guys. I'm just looking at some of these, Ohio State, for example, and their freshman wide receiver and their transfer receivers and running backs, and they fit in just fine in that system.
We'll close it out with this. Max, you'll be the one to remember this. What do you remember about old Kwame Etwe?
I remember he was one of the walk-ons that people were like, "Why is this guy a walk-on? Give him a scholarship and let him play more." That kind of dude.
Yeah,
he's quick. I remember him being a quick dude, like a little jitterbug.
He was quick. He backed up Travion Williams his senior season at A&M, even though he was a walk-on. And I'll just have a shameless plug for my story this week. We got to talk to Kwame. He filed an objection to the House settlement. The settlement, the court case everyone's talking about, House versus the NCAA, that's going to potentially bring revenue sharing and roster caps and more scholarships to players, revenue back pay to athletes. He filed an objection on behalf of walk-ons. Right now, the class that's going to get that back pay only is made up of scholarshiped athletes. They didn't use how many snaps a player play. They didn't use stats. They just said if you were on scholarship, you're going to get this broadcast back pay, and if you weren't on scholarship, you're not. He logged into his little portal, actually logged in one day, and it did say that he was going to have more than $50,000 in back pay, and then 2 days later they checked back in and go, "Oh, never mind, we forgot you weren't on scholarship, you get nothing." And so he's filing a petition with the court. April 7th is the final approval hearing for that settlement. And so if Judge Claudia Wilkins decides that she wants to call him to testify, for her to hear his case on why walk-ons should be included in this, he possibly can. But I'm curious what maybe y'all think about this, and the idea that players from 2016 on are going to get some back pay for the time that their face was on TV broadcasts, and the fact that in the settlement as it sits now, the only players who are going to get that are the players who are on scholarship, which he argued some of those players could be a guy who came in on scholarship, never played, got hurt, got medically redshirted, never played a game again, but was on an athletic scholarship because of that medical retirement, and he's going to get back pay too because he was on scholarship.
Yeah, I see both arguments. I see kind of why they make the distinction to scholarships, but again, if you have a player that is was critical to a team, regardless of being a scholarship, I feel like he should be entitled to that back pay. But then you start comparing it to the pros. They're going to get a contract whether they're healthy or not. So I get that it doesn't seem fair for a scholarship guy to get the money, but he was on scholarship to begin with for a reason. So, I guess, that's where that's where their back pay is coming from. It's kind of like, a professional being under contract gets hurt, he's still going to get his money.
I think that if the precedent is already set that these people are going to get back pay, I think Kwame has every right to believe that he's entitled to that too. Especially
since they said they were going to give it to him, and then oops, our bad.
I mean, there's got to be at least a settlement or something that they can do for him there, and I don't know. There's got to be some sort of narrative line that you can draw between a walk-on at Texas A&M trying to get his piece and the tradition and culture of the 12th man at this school. Right?
I mean,
so I feel like it almost behooves us to root for the guy in this situation.
Well, and I mean, one of the guys I talked to for the story was Colin Gillespie, probably the most famous 12th man since they've had that tradition of giving a player a 12. And if you really think about it, he was only on scholarship for a couple of seasons, so he's only going to get back pay for a couple of the seasons, not all of the seasons that he was at A&M. And think about, this is for lost NIL opportunities. When you're at A&M and you're the 12th man, it doesn't matter how much you actually see action on the field. Like, there's people who are wearing your number because that's just the number of the fan base.
Right.
And so it's one of the most marketable positions to be in at A&M, and yet he's only going to get a little bit of that lost back pay. It's an interesting story, and there's going to be a lot more to unfold with this House settlement as it's going to go to final approval here soon, and then how that shakes out if it comes down. The other point of this, too, is, and there's not necessarily anything data to point to this, but a lot of the players I talk to still are just kind of being pessimistic, or hopefully optimistic about it, and saying it would be great if we got some money, but I'm not convinced that this is going to go through as it is.
Sure.
I'm kind of not getting their hopes up for it.
Yeah,
so
I get that.
It's going to be a crazy offseason in college athletics, and this is just a piece of it. That being said, that's all the time we have. I can see Max is slowly fading over here as I'm talking about the business of college athletics.
Well,
yes.
you got me. Yes.
So we'll go ahead and call it quits there.
Guilty.
So be sure to check KBTX.com for all of our coverage of everything A&M athletics right now. Check out the broadcast to see these two guys at 5, 6, 10,
yep,
all the above.
Yep.
And then be back here next week as we talk a little bit more Texas A&M sports. So for Tyler Shaw, Max Crawford, I'm Travis Brown. This is the Aggie Game Day Extra podcast. We'll see you next week.
I am interested. The work you do matters.